Welcome, dear friends, to another episode of the Space Force Mascot Moonicles. Today, with the Unmannerly Forester and the Secret of Devil's Lake. Diary entry from 4th of July, 2020. The dear moon was celebrating behind closed curtains of dark clouds. The campfire and the torches being the only light source on the empty top of Devil's Hill. From the direction of the old weather station came a cool breeze from the rubble of the golden city of Babylon. I watched the dancing sparks of the flames disappear into the night, when I noticed one spark behaving very oddly, and I soon realized it was, indeed, a firefly. She became bigger as I looked at her closer, and at the size of a hummingbird she said, "It's good to have a light when one wants to go into the darkness." I looked at the torches, and it dawned on me that this was another case for the Space Force Mascot. I grabbed a torch and followed the firefly downhill and through the forest under the Allies' watch until we arrived at Devil's Lake. There, on the water's shiny surface, I saw a dozen little stars, and I looked up to see that the curtain was still closed. The firefly laughed in delight and flew off into the night. And I looked at the stars in the lake and wondered if they are missed in heaven. I sat down in the grass and enjoyed the magical scenery for a while before I tested the water with my toes. Surprised to find that it wasn't wet at all, I decided to do a full-body investigation. I slowly walked into the lake until I lost contact to the ground. I moved my arms, and I was flying with the stars. And here they were laughing and sparkling. And when I turned on my back, the curtain opened up, and the moon appeared in the sky above and illuminated the forest with its silver light. I looked around and noticed a gloomy star at the far end, and I asked, "Why are you so gloomy?" He turned his back on me and pouted until I tried again. "Do you not like it here?" "No," he said. "I hate it. I never wanted to come here in the first place, but they thought it would be fun." Then I felt a cold breeze coming down from Devil's Hill, and the stars ceased to laugh and sparkle, and everything became very quiet. I heard a crackle in the distance, and the water suddenly turned wet. And without making a sound, I slowly swam towards the torch in the grass. As I emerged from the lake, I found myself awaited by a man with a felt hat and a shotgun. His eyes were hidden in the shadow of his hat, and I decided to call him the forester. He barked at me. "Who gave you permission to swim in my lake?" Not too impressed by his mannerism, I answered, "I guess it was he who made it." Likewise untouched by my wise guy reaction, he replied, "Oh, really? Did he give it to you in writing? Or did he just call you up or send you a message?" I smiled and sat by the flame of the torch to dry. He waited all night for an answer, until he tried again. "Did he give you a golden ticket?" Watching a lemon moth fly over the grass and land on my knee, where it was drying its wings in the sun, I remembered the story about the moth and the candle. The first moth said, "I know the secret of the candle. I saw the flame." The second moth said, "I know the secret of the candle. I felt the flame's heat." And the third moth flew into the flame and burned. I asked the unmannerly forester, "Have you never heard from him?" He didn't answer all day, and by nightfall he sat down in the grass, overlooking his gloomy lake with the little stars quietly drifting in the moonlight, when I asked, "Have you ever heard your stars laughing or seen them sparkle?" "No," he answered, "they can't, and I made sure of that." I thought about this for a while and asked, "Why?" "Because they are the fallen ones," he said, and threw a piece of rubble into the lake. Unsatisfied with this explanation, I got up and walked into the water to have another swim with the little stars. When I came to the gloomy one at the far end, I asked, "Why do you not go back?" And he said, "Because we are now the fallen ones, and the fallen can't fly." I let myself sink to the bottom and took a few strokes on ground level, coming back to surface in the center of the lake. My specialty in high school was the 50-meter freestyle. They called me Larry the Bird because I was so fast they thought I was flying. And in my current role as first Space Force mascot, I decided that now was a good time to activate my skills. I swam back to the far end in training mode, turned around, and dove into full action. Needless to say, my performance did not go unnoticed, as I found the unmannerly forester a little shook up when I suddenly stood before him. "There," I asked, "who gave you permission to keep the little stars captive?" He shouted in response, "I don't need anyone's permission. I permit myself." and I went to sit next to the flame of the torch to dry. The lemon moth returned the next day with the morning dew and landed on my knee to dry its wings in the sun. Without taking my eyes off the butterfly, I asked the unmannerly forester, "Have you still not heard from him?" When the moon rose above the lake, I heard a little humming sound in the distance, and at the far end of the water I spotted the firefly. She flew around, and in the center of Devil's Lake she left a shooting spark, and I saw that the unmannerly forester saw it too. He threw another piece of rubble and shouted, "There can be no spark. I have taken it away from them, and only I can give it back." I heard the firefly snickering and decided to go for another swim. From the water I watched her fly back and forth and all around, fast like the wind, and shooting from center a blazing spark high into the air. The gloomy star's voice sounded from behind me. Maybe it's not true that we can't fly anymore. The firefly laughed in delight, and drifting on my back, I made my way to shore with the firefly at the size of a hummingbird sitting on my shoulder. And when I stood before the unmannerly forester, he shouted, "It's impossible!" The firefly snickered a little, and I gave her a wink, and together we snickered some more. I sat next to the flame of the torch to dry and said, "I don't believe you." He threw more rubble into the lake and shouted, "What do you mean?" And here, the little star that believed it couldn't fly emerged from the water, and with him all his friends, and together they filled the moonlit air with golden sparks as they left Devil's Lake by the old weather station, and all the stars in heaven rejoiced upon their return. I enjoyed this magical scenery, and before dawn I asked the unmannerly forester, "Have you heard from him now?" The forest around the lake was illuminated by the silver and golden light of the moon and the stars, and all the trees were dancing to their song, and the once gloomy little star came shooting down from the sky. Taking a dramatic dip in the water, turning up spiraling, leaving the lake covered in countless golden sparks. And when dawn came, the once unmannerly forester took off his hat and laid down his shotgun, and here he saw the firefly at the size of a hummingbird sitting on my shoulder. His eyes lit up, and he smiled, without moving his lips. After nightfall, I followed the firefly back to the empty top of Devil's Hill, and before leaving, the forester asked me to let you know that the secret lies in the forest behind the trees. Thank you for listening. See you again next time.